And welcome back. I am Jeff Green, pinch hitting for Mayor Helene Schneider this morning on the Mayor's Radio Show. You're listening to News Talk 990 KTMS. We are here with Kathy Murillo, the newest addition of the Santa Barbara City Council. I love that funk intro, Kathy.
I know, Jordan, thank you for that funky beat.
I'm going to guess this is your new favorite number, 8,289. You're going to remember that one for a while, right?
Right, and you asked me who am I grateful to. I'm grateful to those people who voted for me, like first and foremost.
And there are approximately 8,289 of those.
Yay! And, you know, and I also need to thank my volunteers. I've been advised, don't start down a list of names because then you're going to forget somebody. But, you know, it is an effort that takes people who organized. I'm not sure if you've ever actually done any walking in a political campaign, but you have the voter rolls.
I have.
And you go to the door. You go door to door of registered voters, and there's 45,000 of them, and we only had 18,000 come out. Is that kind of the rough numbers that you have there?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I want to help improve voter turnout in the city of Santa Barbara. We did a lot of voter registration in the early part of the year. I have to say, at the end of the election, you kind of only focus on people who have registered to vote. You have to let go of voter registration at some point. But next year, my people and I are dedicated to getting more people registered to vote. And what I found, Jeff, talking to people who, a lot of people understand government issues, they care about things, but they just don't make that connection, that little walk across the bridge to the fact that they need to be registered to vote and vote to influence those issues. So it takes a little time to convince somebody that they should be engaged in the political process. But like I said, we did quite a bit of it. We had a voter registration picnic. I think we had two of them. One in Bonet Park, which is my neighborhood on the west side, and the other one was in Eastside Park, which is a little beautiful little park behind Franklin Elementary School, and there's like a community gardens there. This is a really nice place to spend the afternoon. And what we did was we printed out the voter lists in that zone, and we went to voters, and then we went in between the houses where there was no one registered to vote, and we registered people. So I just wanted to put that out there, that all of that is very important to me. And the vote by mail election, some people had concerns about that we would call people and they would say, my ballot is around here somewhere. So there is something about growing up with a polling place election where, on Tuesday you go down there kind of thing. So I think the city can do a little bit of improvement in getting the word out. And I'd like to see more public service announcements on the television, because right in that last week, right before the election, we were just hoping there was some mass communication to the people, to the electorate, that there was an election happening. And just because I was living and breathing it for 10 months didn't mean that everybody else was. So.
You definitely did a strong get out the vote, door to door,
yes,
in a good old fashioned way. And I want to acknowledge, as we were walking into the studio this morning, you said, kind of quietly, a lot of people didn't think I could do this.
Oh.
And I have to admit, there were times when I had my doubts, and I'm a Kathy, fan, and I've known you a long time, and I thought, what is it going to take for someone who's really been outside the process as a reporter, but not outside the political process as it is known to make that leap. And I have to say, I was speaking with our state assemblyman the other day, and we were talking about the election, what had happened, and he said, she worked harder than anybody else on that good old-fashioned door-to-door. And so I just want to acknowledge that I think there's a good number of folks that realize that still makes a difference, and you did a fine job of it.
Well, that's how you should do it, and especially in a local race. And Jeff, just sometime in the middle of going door to door, and people kept saying yes, I thought I had a really good chance. There comes a point where you go, I'm feeling momentum, I'm feeling some really positive energy. And then people knew my name too, and I think there was some name recognition. So
that's great. Well,
yeah.
you got a lot of support, and you got a lot of folks pulling for you, and you did a lot of hard work, so you're here. Congratulations. Now that is all past, so I want to talk about the future. I want to talk about you're going to be seated on that council. I know you know what that looks like because you've watched a whole lot of council meetings, but I want to just list a couple of policy positions that I pulled off your own website, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on how these look going forward. The first thing you list actually on your policy positions during the campaign was the general plan update. Now this has been a major I don't know what you want to call it, a major issue that seems to just continue and continue, and there are meetings and meetings and community meetings and policy meetings of all sorts, and you say, I want passage of a general plan update that maintains the city's livability. I want carefully designed affordable housing in targeted downtown areas supported by a range of transportation choices for residents and commuters. Are we going to see that?
The current city council, I think, is close to finishing the process and approving a final version. And the tricky part about the general plan adoption is that it takes 5 votes. And, you know, if you're paying attention, and I know you are, there's an ideological divide at 4 versus 3. And really the crux of the matter with the general plan, Jeff, was this concern about density of housing. And when someone says high density, that has a lot of different meanings to people, but it can frighten people who don't want to see, the mayor right now is in Japan, and people talk about Tokyo, and that city has some very, very dense housing. You know, high rises and apartments stacked on apartment. New York City is kind of like that. I don't know. I've always lived in Southern California and Santa Barbara, and so, you know, I am not used to that kind of density myself. So people are concerned about Santa Barbara being overdeveloped. That's another thing. I don't want Santa Barbara to be overdeveloped either. I was promoting that we could put some well-designed, compact, sustainable housing in areas where the housing is supported by transportation options. I think people sometimes, what they're worried about when things are feeling crowded, it's not so much people as it is cars. If there's no parking on your street, you start to feel like, you know, there's too many people. It affects your quality of life, and I think that's what people want to avoid. So that was really the crunch point on the general plan, and it looks like the current council has come to some understanding that they're going to allow some of this more compact housing in areas in sort of an experimental phase. And they have a majority of agreement there. So I think that's how that's going to go forward. But, you know, I was just talking to somebody in the lobby, and he was saying there's a lot of people who work in Santa Barbara and they have to live somewhere else. And we do have to reduce commuting if we can. The flip side of that is transportation. So I'd like to see, and I will work for, better commuter rail from Ventura and from Lompoc. Santa Maria is off the train tracks, but buses could work for that. So we have to be creative in everything that we do, and it looks actually like the general plan will be off the table, you know, once I get in there. But the
shortly
issue,
after you
right,
take your seat.
But the issue of housing will always be there. And just real quick, 60% of the people who live in Santa Barbara are renters. I'm a renter. And I'm for tenants' protections. The Rental Housing Mediation Task Force is this function of the city.
Now we're going to get to that in a
that
second.
helps arbitrate landlords and tenants, and I support that too for both the property owner and the resident.
Okay, we're going to get to that because that's one of the funding questions that very likely will be up before you. I want to remind folks you're listening to News Talk 990 KTMS. I'm Jeff Green, sitting in for Mayor Helene Schneider, who, as Kathy, my guest, just mentioned, is in Japan. We're speaking with Kathy Murillo, the newest electee to the Santa Barbara City Council. So you started down the road of rental housing mediation. Now that was one of the questions at the forum that we moderated, and it was actually a simple yes or no. You gave yourself a yes, and that was, would you vote for funding to continue it? Do you have some thoughts on sort of the utility of that and the bigger budget crunch that you're going to be stepping into, as many people are?
The value of that mediation task force is that a great deal of its function is supported by volunteers, volunteer mediators. So whenever the city can leverage, you know, a volunteer effort like that, or grant monies, and then the city kind of throws in the rest of the money, you know, we have to take advantage of all of those situations. And if 60% of the people rent, you know, we have to take care of their rights And, you know, I've been a renter here my whole life, and it's harsh when you lose your apartment. I think I was in between apartments for one summer and stayed with some people. So, you know, and it was uncomfortable. So I really do appreciate people who rent and people who are looking for affordable purchase. I think things are a little better right now, you know, for people who are looking to buy, just because the real estate market is so painful, especially for our real estate community. And I feel for them and want to work with the Realtors Association about how the city can be more supportive of what they do.
Well, we've got time for probably one more set of questions here before we go into a break, and this is another tough one. You know, on election night, on Tuesday night in Ohio, there was on the ballot this question of limiting bargaining rights for public employees. Of course, this comes from a long line of policy debates in the last couple of years in the country, everywhere, about the role of public employees, and of course the inaffordability of public employee and pension systems as they currently exist. So depending on how you frame that issue, there have been various proposals. You know, you mentioned in your platform, I'll just read it direct. You say, I support fair wages and benefits for all city workers and contractors, but I believe reform of the public pension system is necessary to maintain its fiscal sustainability. So what do you see there in this last little bit here before we take our next break?
Let me start by acknowledging that the retirement system, CalPERS, you know, took a tremendous hit during the recession because of what happened in Wall Street. And there were some risky lending, trading. They were playing with pretend money over there. And then when everything came due, there was no assets. And so the stock market, crash is kind of a specific word, but it hit bottom. So so then CalPERS was defunded, and so I will not blame the public employees unions for that, because that wasn't their doing. When I talk about reform, it's a matter of being able to pay them what we can, and the labor unions are always giving concessions and working with the government entities, and I expect they'll continue to do that. But I do support our public employees. I'm a working person myself, and I appreciate what our city employees do. I really look forward to working with them and being a good boss to them.
Okay. Well, there's no doubt there will be more issues around that when you take your seat, so we'll have plenty of time to talk about that in the future. I'll remind folks you're listening to News Talk 990 KTMS. I'm Jeff Green, in for Mayor Helene Schneider. We're speaking with Kathy Murillo, the latest addition to the Santa Barbara City Council, and we'll be back with her in just a couple of minutes.